Hey YouTubers, and welcome back to my YouTube channel Master That English, where we understand, analyze and interpret the important texts and concepts that may be part of your English curriculum. Our topic for today is another form of drama that has evolved from the combination of two distinct forms of drama, where tragedy and comedy combine to give us tragic comedy. So, get your pens and notepads ready because here we go. What's unique about this form of drama is that it has been criticized by many significant writers. The negative comment that I like the most is the one stated by the English poet Sir Philip Sidney of the Elizabethan Age, who in his critical work, A Defense of Poetry, describes tragicomedy as mongrel tragic comedy. I know that was a harsh comment, but we are not going to dishearten ourselves from knowing the very genesis of this form of drama. So let's begin. When we talk about the very origin of this form of drama, we have to guess it, and I think the guess is always going to start from the very country that was considered to be the inspiration for many civilizations. That is the Greek culture. In the Greek culture, it was mainly the dramatist Euripides who showed the initial traces of tragic comic plays. The two of his works that show this trace were Alcestis and Iphigenia. Both the works showed a very unique trait that was not to be seen in the works written before, which was that the ending was on a happy note. That interesting insight now brings us to our next question. That is, who used the term tragic comedy for the first time? This trace was first to be found in the Roman civilization, in the works of the dramatist Plautus. I'm sure you remember him if you have done the form of drama comedy. So let's continue. Plautus wrote a work called Amphitryon. In this work, he wrote a preface before beginning his very story. And in that particular preface, he stated it very clearly that he is intending to have a combination of tragedy and comedy in his work, which is why he stated, "I will make it a mixture. Let it be tragic comedy." Aren't you curious? What is this story all about? Well, let's have a quick glimpse at it. This story is mainly about the Roman mythological god Jupiter, who was most naughty and was famously known for his ability to transform shape into any form. Even in this work, Jupiter transforms himself into the shape of a warrior Amphitryon, and he does this with a very wicked intention. That is, he wants to have a secret affair with Amphitryon's wife. And he is very successful in doing so because the real Amphitryon is not there in the empire because he has gone out for war. But the problem in the play arises when Amphitryon returns from the battlefield. And yes, there is a lot of confusion, there is a lot of misunderstanding that takes place in the future course of events. But what is interesting is that by the end of the play, all the problems are resolved. And this solution can be seen when Jupiter actually blesses Amphitryon's wife to bear two children. One is his child, which is the immortal child, who is also known as Hercules or Heracles. And the other son that she bears is actually a mortal child, who is the son of the true Amphitryon. His name is Iphicles. Wasn't that an interesting story? All right, now let us see how the tragic comedy influenced the Renaissance age. That brings us to our next question. Who was the first person in Renaissance age to support tragic comedy? Well, this person comes from the very place, Italy, and the name of this person is Giambattista Gheraldi Sentio. And the work that he wrote in support of tragic comedy was on the composition of comedies and tragedies. What's unique about this work is that in this work, For the first time, tragic comedy has been used as a term. And the term that Gambarista Geraldi Cinthio used was tragedimeste. So, what's so interesting about tragic comedy here? Gambarista Geraldi Cinthio believed that tragic comedy actually provides a more pleasurable experience than tragedy, because tragedy is always confined with intense emotions like fear and pity, but you don't get to experience that in tragic comedy because it's something which is very soothing. You enjoy it, there is no bloodshed involved in the end, and that is what makes it unique. Let us now shift our attention to the next unique fact that will provide us greater insight in this very question, which is, who was the first person in Renaissance age to achieve success in tragic comedy? Well, this was again an Italian person. His name is Giovanni Battista Geraldi, and the work that he wrote was Il Pastor Fido. It translates into The Faithful Shepherd, written in the year 1590. Now, the fact that this was the most successful work during this period, we should also know and understand what were the chief features in Geraldi's work, The Faithful Shepherd. The first interesting thing that you actually get to see here is the distribution of tragic and comic elements in the plot structure, where you notice that the first half of the story is always about tragic events. Something very serious is being discussed. In this particular story, you notice that the mortals have to perform an act of sacrifice of a human being, a virgin, and this has to be done in order to please the gods. But obviously, no human would actually want to perform a sacrifice. And in order to avoid this practice, they think of alternative measures in which they can please the god also and try to have a better kind of lifestyle for themselves. So in order to do this, they take certain measures, and this manner in which they are taking measures is how the story gradually starts moving on. And we notice that one of the chief elements that you get to see in the rising action is also the aspect related to romance. So the lovers are also involved in exploring and understanding about each other. The interesting thing actually happens in the second half of the story, that in the plot structure is called the falling action, where you notice that all the issues that were there in the beginning start to, in a way, get a kind of solution. They are getting resolved. And by the end of the story, you notice that everything is on a happy note. Everybody is happy. The lovers understand each other. They share very good, positive feelings for each other. And the element of tragedy that was hinted in the beginning is also no longer there. So that is what is interesting about this work, is the blend of tragedy and comedy, where the first half is always tragic and the second half is always comic. Let us now also find out which was the first tragic comedy written in England. This was actually written by an Oxford scholar. His name was Nicholas Grimald, and the name of his work was Christus Rebus. It's a Latin word, and it translates into English as The Resurrection of Christ, published in the year 1543. All right. Now, in whose reign were tragic comedies popular in England? That would be during the reign of James I, that is from 1603 to 1625. This period is also known as the Jacobian Age. Jacobian itself is named after the Emperor James I. So which were the popular tragic comedies in the Jacobean period? The first one was actually written by John Fletcher, and the name of his work was The Faithful Shepherdess. What's interesting about this work is that it is mainly influenced by the Italian writer's work, that is Geraldi's work. It's called Il Pastor Fido. The confusion in this work is noticed by the series of love interests that are eventually sorted out in the end. Let us now shift our attention to the next person who is considered to be the bard of English literature, that is William Shakespeare. His most popular tragic comedies are often called his mature plays, and these include Cymbeline, Winter's Tale, and The Tempest. Let's have a quick overview of the common tragic comic elements in William Shakespeare's works. Let's just take an example of his work, The Tempest. The first thing that you get to see in this work is the exaggerated characters that are so loud in their expression, their behavior, and all that aggression is clearly represented in this character, Caliban, who doesn't hesitate in giving his disagreement in the way and the manner in which Prospero treats him, because he knows that this island was not owned by Prospero, it was owned by his mother. And technically, he deserves to be living here with the freedom that he was living at one point of time. And now you could see that in his expression, the way he's roaring and showing his kind of discomfort with the authority that this man tries to always enforce on him.
This island is mine.
The next chief characteristic that you get to see here is the unfortunate events are followed by the happy ending. This can be noticed at the very beginning of the story, in The Tempest, where you notice that an old man with a young girl has actually entered this island. He has gone through so much misery because he was forcefully banished from his own kingdom.
I was forcefully banished from my kingdom.
And now he has to adapt in this very lonely island with primate animals and celestial creatures. So that is the kind of lifestyle he is living. But what is interesting is that all these issues and worries that he went through are in a way resolved in the end, because eventually he does get back his throne. And that is the happy note that Shakespeare represents in his work. The third interesting characteristic which we noticed in this work is the incorporation of music to enliven the environment. This can be noticed by the character Ariel, which is a spirit. And this spirit actually attempts to change the mood for the character Ferdinand, the young man who is depressed and sad because he has just lost his father and the crew members in the shipwreck. And the music that Ariel sings allows him to distract himself to another direction. And this direction leads him to Miranda, the young girl with whom he shares the love at first sight. So that's the magic that Ariel is able to create with its music, totally able to change the direction. Let's hear her sing. Come unto this yellow sands. The last characteristic feature is the incorporation of romantic motives, pastoral background, or supernatural machinery. Let us look at the first subpart, which is the usage of motive of lovers. That means that the lovers usually share a very quick attraction for each other. It's almost like lovers first sight. The second aspect is the usage of pastoral background, which again was a very distinct feature used in tragicomedy. The third important element in this was the usage of supernatural machinery, where you're using a supernatural element is actually trying to control things, like the spirit Ariel is able to control a lot of elements and a lot of things around it. So these elements are usually there. Even the magic that Prospero uses is considered to be a very interesting supernatural machinery. That brings us to the end of the characteristics that are there in the tragicomic works of Shakespeare. Let us now look at the next section, which is how did tragicomedy evolve later? The most significant change in this form is usually noticed in the 20th century, where writers were aiming to show the loss of values in the society with the help of tragic comedy. One such effort is to be seen in the works of the Irish playwright John Millington Synge, where he is directly critiquing the Irish society through his work Shadow of the Glen and Playboy of the Western World. For example, in The Shadow of the Glen, you notice that Synge highlights the subjugation women undergo to enjoy a comfortable lifestyle in the society by compromising with their freedom in their marital relationship. On the other hand, his work Playboy of the Western World highlighted the loss of human values where the younger generation has no respect for their elders. Both these works went through a lot of criticism, especially by the Irish society. You would be surprised to know that the work The Playboy of the Western World resulted in riots during the premiere of the play in Dublin in the year 1907. And this audience were completely against it.
Your play should be banned.
You're disgracing Irish culture. Let us now talk about our last section where we'll notice how tragic comedies were used indirectly to critique the society, especially after the Second World War, where you notice that everything had come to an end. There was disillusionment because people didn't know in which direction they are going. What are they doing? What are they making of their life? And all these doubts also led to another form of tragic comedy, which was called absurd drama. In this absurd drama, what you notice is that you were not having any sense of what the characters were doing. Their lack of direction actually represented their confusion in life, their lack of purpose in life. And the one dramatist who really represents this facet very clearly is Samuel Beckett. The work in which he represented this idea was called Waiting for Godot, in which you notice two characters are just sitting in one place and waiting for somebody to come. The name of this person is obviously Godot, but by the end of the play, you do not know who these two characters were really waiting for. That is what is the absurdity of life. Do we really know who we are waiting for? Do you know what is your real purpose in life? This sort of lack of direction is actually representing the comic aspect in the play. And the tragedy is the actual aspect of loss of culture and peace of mind. Because people have no culture in the present day society, they fail to represent anything in a beautiful fashion. When you have culture, you can represent so many things about your life, your beliefs, your values. But because of war, everything came to an end. All those monuments were destroyed in that war. So what was left? Nothing. This is what is the tragic element in these works. And the comedy is the practice of irrational actions, where you're doing the same thing again and again and again. As you see the characters, even in this work, say the same word again and again, where they do something stupid, and by the end of this, when they decide to leave somewhere or to go somewhere, they only stop them by saying the very words, "We cannot go." Why can we not go? Because we are waiting for Godot. And that is how the story comes to an end without a disclosure of who these two individuals were really waiting for. That brings us to the end of this lecture. I hope you enjoyed the new form of drama that we have discussed this time, that is tragicomedy. If you're new to this channel, please join the family and subscribe to it. And if you feel that this kind of lecture is insightful, it's helping you and really broadening up your horizon, please do give it a like. And don't forget to share, because sharing is caring. Until next time, this is me, Karishma, signing off for now. Take care. Bye-bye.